Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel where we take a look at the e-commerce stores and see how we can better optimize them. Now, today I have a very special video for you guys because we're going to do something that, as far as I am aware, has never been attempted on YouTube. And you can get a little bit of an idea here from the screen right now. We have 3 stores side by side on mobile. And the idea is to take a look at these different approaches that these highly successful stores are utilizing. By the way, if you do like this kind of videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel and also like this video to optimize your feed for future videos. It will enable the YouTube algorithm to understand that you do like more of an educational content over cat videos, and as a result, it will give you more of that. So help your future self be more successful by doing that right now. Now, the stores that we have here, we have 3 different ones as mentioned. Highly successful ones or moderately successful ones, and 3 kind of moderately different approaches as well. First of all, we have Fashion Nova, and they are the leader, at least when it comes to Instagram followers, at 21.4 million. Next up, we have Shop Redress, almost 800k in terms of followers, and lastly, we have Lulus at a bit over 2 million. So the idea, looking at these stores side by side and seeing what they do differently and commenting on those approaches. Let's first start with the header menu, a very important part and one of the most overlooked parts in e-commerce optimization, because it's often very easy to ignore the mobile header menu and focus on other things. Now, all 3 of these stores are leading with some kind of shipping related offer or notification. So Fashion Nova, free shipping on orders over $100, same with the Red Dress, and Lulus actually does standard shipping for all orders. And there's a little bit of a difference in approach there. In Lulus, you can purchase quicker shipping if you so choose to. So something to consider there as an approach, whichever is the best for you. Also, a noteworthy thing here is that Fashion Nova is probably adjusting to their audience a bit with all these different widgets. So they probably can get away with showing these many things at once, because people are more likely to understand as younger consumers what they are about. Whereas both Lulus and Red Dress lead with a little bit of a simpler setup. So they only have the search, the cart icon, and the menu. And Fashion Nova has a wish list here, and I think these are previously seen items also. So very different approaches there. If you look at the menus themselves, you have quite similar in terms of the overall structure. There's the new items on all of them that is considered to be a very high value category for them, definitely. Otherwise it wouldn't be here. One thing you can see here with Fashion Nova is probably they're also adjusting their audience, and the audience might be a little bit more price sensitive. As a result, they are prioritizing sale as opposed to Red Dress and Lulus. Maybe a bit more premium, if that's a correct way to describe these stores, compared to Fashion Nova at least. So they are de-emphasizing that part. And before we jump into the front page, let's also take a quick look at the search. So the search functionality here with Fashion Nova is quite nice. Gives you hot searches for suggestions. You can search with a photo as well, and then you have that search item. Here on Red Dress, it's a little bit less impressive. You could have a drop down here for similar hot searches, no reason not to. You're just left to your own devices in completing this and figuring out what you actually should search. It also doesn't give you any kind of suggestions here of what you could search. And a very similar story with Lulus that I'm looking for, and it's perhaps a good example of when copying from competitors or modeling goes wrong. So this is a thing where you might copy competitors, but they may not know what they're doing either. So you have to be able to distinguish that difference there. Moving on the front page, both Fashion Nova and Lulus take advantage of the New Year's Eve and have some kind of specific, bit more tailored approach to it, whereas Red Dress, I think, loses out on this comparison. Not really utilizing that fully, at least on the first banner. In their defense, on mobile, at least they have a follow-up here for the holiday collection. So that's useful. On red dress, one thing that is perhaps missing, that the others do well, is showing the overall categories, whereas here they don't really give out a good idea of what is available. And this leads people in a very like Russian roulette type of manner here to shop the look, and there's only a few options. So you'd basically have to go to the menu in order to see what's available, and this is very much a hit or miss approach, where most likely it is done from a desktop first perspective, and they haven't really considered the mobile on that. Contrast that to Fashion Nova or Lulus, where they have their main categories here available, just like it would be in an app. So well done by these two stores, and pretty good implementation there. So as you see from Lulus, for example, it is purely about categories, no products there, and the same thing for Fashion Nova. So that's an approach that works for them. Let's take a look at this overall category page. So I'll try to see the all dresses page, because that is something that all of them are offering, and then we can go and understand that perspective. So first of all, this is one that we've started to implement for our clients and highly recommend it. Is this kind of slider here, because there's very little downside to having it. If you don't have any kind of quick filtering here in terms of jumping to further subcategories, you are exposing yourself to over 4,000 results, and that's simply too much. It's just not going to go through them all, and the chances of you hitting something that you would find useful is lower with such a wide category. So more refined, the better. Here on Lulus and Red Dress, I think they largely missed that. On Lulus defense, they do have their sorting in a similar way, which is completely fine as well. And there, in functionality-wise, would be great if Lulus also had a sticky filtering here, because otherwise you risk going into this super in-depth collection and never finding your way out of it. So that's why filters like this can be very useful in the sticky menu. Now, Red Dress has quite a bit of products as well, 26 pages. They miss out on the opportunity to show how many results there are currently on that page, which could help motivate people to filter out these results. So right now we only have sorting, which is a feature that is not really that helpful. So sorting by newest or oldest or name or brand, not really that useful for these in-depth category pages. This also, as a functionality, is questionable whether you'd really need it, since most of these would be viewable 2 per row anyway. If you have 1 per row, you expose the user into this super long page. So even though they might prefer it, it often doesn't work out that well, simply because it's not really useful for the sale part. And notice how few filters there are, and how it's also a little bit weird language here with Red Dress, because refine is not really common when it comes to e-commerce. So we want these to be somewhat prototypical, where you say filter, because that's what people are used to seeing. Nice thing here though is that you are able to see how many results there are per category. So that's a good implementation there. So liking that part, would love to see that also on the colors, but sometimes that might be a little bit more challenging technically. Alright, moving on. Next up we have the product page, and here very different implementations all along. So first of all, you have this, for example, which really buries the add to bag quite far down the page on Lulus. And on Fashion Nova, you have the exact opposite of it, where the add to cart is actually visible. Now, there's no one absolute best approach to this, and I don't subscribe to these rules where you'd always have to have the add to cart button visible. However, generally you'd want to have it fairly quick. And both Redress and Lulus don't really have that. So what they could consider here is a sticky option for it. So people would be able to see this right away. And it's possible to have that where once you click on it, you might scroll down to the sizings are, and there you can go from it. So one thing you notice here is there's these little boxes here, or this indicating that there's more product images. Fashion Nova does it a little bit differently, where they show half of this body first. Again, a little bit audience specific, so there's no right or wrong answer here. Fashion Nova can do that also partly because their audience is younger, perhaps a bit more tech savvy, etc. So there's benefits to that. And this is also where the audience understanding and adjusting comes into play. For example, this heart icon is something that is more understood by the younger audience, whereas here the exact correct way could be to show the wish list instead. So there you have these kinds of adjustments that you can make and you should make. One thing that we've consistently found loses out on A/B tests is guiding people from the cart page where they are shopping a specific product into social media. It's just generally a terrible idea, especially in the middle of everything, where suddenly you are reminding people that Instagram exists, and that's not a good idea at this point, as we found. When it comes to the size charts, this is very important as well. All three of these stores do a fairly good one, and they have this as a pop-up, not as a separate page, and there you will be able to get a pretty good idea of it. I would say there's a very good implementation on Fashion Nova, but it's not quite perfect. If you combined this with how to measure dropdown, you'd be very close to ideal. Here, with the measuring tips, this can also be a little bit of a distraction, because it looks like it's like more relevant, valuable, distracting than it otherwise would be. And also, you should not be able to really scroll away from the size chart like this. So that's one little mistake. On Lulus, we know that we are on the dresses part, so anything unrelated to dresses, generally unnecessary. One additional thing though that can be useful, and it's probably the reason why they are doing it, is if people know their size for, say, bottoms, but they don't know the exact thing here, so that's probably why they actually have it like this. However, this could be an interesting thing to see and test if they really have the traffic for it. So 3 different size charts, and generally like a good implementation here with the inches and centimeters. It's just really clear what the actual sizes are. So well done. Next up, we have the product details. If it is going to be a small drop down like this, don't see a downside of having it is open, and then producing a little bit of a buffer between the add to bag and the next products. So then this gives people an option to focus on this instead of moving on. Redress does something interesting here, something that differs from others. It has the size and fit part here, partly because they implement the size chart differently than the others. Generally, the worse your descriptions are, the more you should hide them, and understandably, if you have thousands of products, you're not going to have great descriptions on all of them. So something, again, to consider. It depends on how good your descriptions are on that. Alright, so that's the product pages. As you can see, all of them have a review widget here, and then on Redress, it is actually hidden here. Typically, we find that reviews perform better if they are above the other items, so there's a connect between what you are actually looking for and the reviews, whereas if they are at the bottom, then not as powerful. And here you can see that this is just confusing. So you have this category here, then you drop the reviews in between, and then you have another category page. And it's like really, really messy to try to understand that. And then also what's the difference between customers also purchased and similar looks, or you might also allow. It's just very, very similar categories here. You might also allow and customers also purchased. So very tricky implementation from that end. Then we have the 15% offs here on 2 of these. So here they are collecting leads. This is one that is a little bit dangerous, where you have such a barrier to the 15% off. So people can get it, but they may not want to sign up for texts, for example. So often it's advisable to also provide the email option. So otherwise, people would feel silly to pay the 15%, but they may not want to have the text marketing. And in this kind of case, you squeeze them perhaps unnecessarily to a point where if there's an absolute no for some person, then they would feel silly, and as a likelihood, they would abandon their order. And this one is get 15% off. You actually have this as a promise here. Then you click here, and it may not be as much. I think this wheel is configured to go to 15% every time. So it's a pretty straightforward. They kind of telegraph it here. That's one where the wheel is in a way unnecessary. So because you have the same thing here. So you are just playing around with the customer and in a way disrespecting them. Okay, let's do the add to bags for this, and we can see the different functionalities. So on Fashion Nova, basically there's only this little action here at the bottom that goes away really fast. That's questionable. They might have a little bit of a different functionality if there's a lot of products on the cart. So here you have an option to see if this is customized. So let me just quickly check it. So they focus a lot on their average order value. As you can see with the add to bags, it actually goes to the you might also like one. So here I would love to see a cart pop-up at some point when the average order value starts to be high enough. Why distract them further if they already have $170 on their cart and you just secure this order? So it could be conditional. I think they are missing out on not having a stronger queue to get to the cart or the checkout. This I think is also quite poor when it comes to I love your style. It doesn't mean anything. It's just added like one product to the cart. It probably is the same message every time you add a product to the cart. Then item added. If you could just show them how it's added, that would be way more powerful. And then you have these 2 options here, keep shopping, secure checkout. And it just like feels high pressure in some ways, where if you had the sidecar show that this product is on the cart, you could have that confirmation, okay, like proceed to checkout. And then I would know what I would be proceeding to checkout with. Here, it's very much like an unnecessary unknown to click on this secure checkout part. And of course, you're not checking out yet, you're just proceeding to checkout. So it's additional friction there as well. Keep shopping also implies that you have to shop and like you would want to add more. So this does bring a lot of unnecessary anxiety. Here is on the right hand side how you could do it. So just a simple, here's the item and the size, especially that you added to the cart. Okay, looks good, this is for me. And then you can have that view back and checkout. Also, they are using the keep shopping one, but it's a secondary one here. So it's like feels a little bit less pressure, and you can also click away from it fairly easily. Okay, let's move on to the carts. So on Fashion Nova, we are already here. And I have also now removed the different products from this to get this as close to matching as possible. So here, first of all, you have the shipping threshold. So Fashion Nova wants to improve your average order value by providing these different thresholds here. So I'm 2 cents away from my free rush shipping. In terms of this, I don't really know what rush shipping means in this part. So there could be a little bit of a tooltip here to outline what that actually means. And once you click on this plus add, you actually have a little bit of a disappointing way to do it. Like so these are add-ons, but they don't seem to be in any way related to this actual product here. And the recommended ones also seem quite random. There's no way to tell what they are from this. It's just pictures. If you click here, it will ask you for the sizing. I don't really know anything about the size charts for these products. If I click here, it's going to be the same. So why offer these two options? Doesn't really make sense. So the upsells could definitely be better. And that's a point of friction. And they have this very unique way of incentivizing people here. So there's this party discount here that can be applied to get one more free. I don't see a confirmation about that. And I understand it now. So it actually moved me from 2 products to now only paying for 1 product. So the functionality works. I moved away a little bit further from rush shipping. In this case and in this pricing, this rush shipping is probably not going to be as valuable to me anymore. I'd love to see some kind of confirmation that this has actually been working, and I wouldn't need to worry about that anymore. But here's the confirmation on that. So that's on that part. I would love to have a further proceed to checkout button further down. And now you might actually miss out on this button as well, because you just see it as a sticky thing after a while. You are focusing on what's actually moving on the page. So that's possibly an additional issue with it. Usually these cart pages also can benefit from just deleting social media and any kind of extra distractions. So they become a little bit simpler than many of the others. For example, like the search bars may not be as valuable for this particular point, and people may actually use them incorrectly as well. Next up, we have this Amazon Pay and PayPal buttons, and those typically don't work that well on the cart, especially if you have, say, Amazon Pay or Google Pay or some random buttons that people are not as used to using. Then it's generally better to just keep it simple. Do you want to proceed to checkout or not? Don't really think of the payment methods at this point. And then on the next one, you can choose whichever payment you'd like. Then on Lulus, one thing that they do really nicely is showcase this journey to qualifying for free standard shipping. It's nicely outlined here, and that's now clear. On, for example, Red Dress, I might have forgot what the shipping policy was at this point, and currently I don't really know what that is. Is it free shipping or do I have to pay for it? On Lulus, I would be quite certain that they would actually benefit from removing these things. We generally see this as a cart page A/B test tends to lose when we do this for apparel stores, and that's been a pretty consistent finding, where this average order value improvement will not offset this conversion rate decrease. So something to consider. And then they have the promo code quite nicely on a little drop down. So it doesn't feel like you have to input one. But if you have one, you can do it. So that's on this Lulus. Very similar in many ways, these checkouts, but still some differences in between them. So let's click out on these checkouts and see if there's any difference on this. So as you see, for Fashion Nova and Lulus, as well as Red Dress, are fairly standard Shopify checkouts. They are all Shopify Plus stores, so they have been able to customize it. And generally speaking, like it's a terrible mistake from Red Dress to include the shirt still and the cart icon. Like there's just no benefit of having the menu available on the checkout. It's absolutely the best practice to not have it. And there's not always that many best practices, but that's one of them. And other than that, fairly standard. They also have the footer distraction, as well as the social media apps. Again, terrible. And then if you are already past the discount field, now you have this sign up thing. If people sign up on this, they may not know where to add it. So they would have to go back to the discount fields and add it on the previous step. So that's another point of potentially big friction. On Lulus, seems the most straightforward. No express checkout distractions. They are focused on getting that email address first, and then they can follow up with that. There's two approaches there. Some prefer and find it better to offer this right away, and some prefer to offer it on the next step, the last step in this Shopify checkout part. There are also some minor differences. For example, Lulus is asking for the country a little bit later on. That's generally been one thing that Shopify has almost certainly tested, because they have a lot of at stake when it comes to checkouts. And they've always had the countries first. And this way you can also confirm that they do ship to your country. So that's a nice thing to be aware of. So otherwise, you might be asked to input all these details, and then you may not know that they actually ship to your location. So possibly a huge issue there as well. So that's it. A little preview view on these different stores, their different approaches, and a little bit of an overview of all these different ways you can really format your apparel store. And all these different approaches can work. There's constant benefits often to similar approaches. One is not necessarily right and one is not necessarily wrong. It just really depends on the context. So for example, on Fashion Nova, we saw that the audience is younger. They probably can get away with some things, whereas Redress and Lulus operate a little bit differently. There might be a different profit margins, for example, whereas Fashion Nova is incentivized to have cheaper fashion, but have those multiple orders, or multiple items per order rather. And Redress, for example, is like not having that same problem, so they operate and function a little bit differently as a store. So these things matter, and there's no exact conversion rate optimization checklist for apparel stores that could be utilized because of this. It's very contextual, it depends, and unfortunately it does require an expert to take a look at it to get a really optimized store. And that's something to be helped with. So if you're interested in help with your apparel or Shopify store, we do conversion optimization all day, every day. You can go to crogurus.com to find out more, and go to crogurus.com/apply. So submit a message to me and we can take a look at it from there. If you are already having some success, we might be able to work together on your store to get you to the next level. Thank you very much. Check out the other parts of the series if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. We have a ton of really valuable, high advanced content coming up on this channel, so you're gonna love it. And stay tuned. Cheers.